bored of in life right now?
Clickbait.
What is something that recently moved you?
The movie The Martian.
It definitely feels a little like that.
Yeah.
So we have a lot to catch up on.
We have a lot
sure.
to catch up on.
But thank you for inviting me back.
It's a thrill to have you here. Congratulations on the album.
The trucks were already lined up, miles of steel and machinery stretching across the parking lot in the early morning dark. Stage equipment, lighting rigs, sound towers, costumes, cables, generators, everything that made the Eras Tour possible, except the person most people came to see. The crew had been here for hours. Some of them had been on the road for months, some for years. Long before the stadium lights turned on, long before the screaming crowds. Long before Taylor Swift walked on stage, they were tired, they were sweaty, they were doing what they always did, and none of them had any idea that by the end of this day, their lives were about to change. When people talk about the Eras Tour, they talk about sold-out stadiums, record-breaking numbers, and cultural domination. They talk about ticket sales, chart performance, and headlines that seem almost unreal. But what most people don't see is the army behind the spectacle. Hundreds of drivers, technicians, stagehands, riggers, costume designers, sound engineers, lighting crews, security teams, caterers, production assistants, people whose names never appear on posters, people whose faces never appear on screens, people who made the impossible happen night after night. And it was for them that Taylor Swift decided to do something no one expected. To understand why this moment mattered so much, you have to understand what the Eras Tour really was. Not just a concert, but a logistical monster. The Eras Tour wasn't built like a normal tour. It was designed as a 3-hour journey through Taylor Swift's entire career, from her earliest country songs to her latest pop anthems. That meant multiple costume changes, entire stage transformations, complex choreography, massive set pieces moving in real time. And it meant moving all of it, every single piece, from city to city, country to country, without fail. One delay could cost millions. One mistake could shut down a show. And yet, night after night, the tour ran with near-perfect precision. That didn't happen by accident. For the crew, life on the Eras Tour followed a brutal rhythm. Load in before sunrise, build the stage piece by piece, test sound, test lighting, fix problems, solve new ones, then the show, then tear down, then on to the next city, sometimes with only hours of rest in between. These were not glamorous days. They were long, physical, exhausting, and most of the time, the reward for that work was simply doing it again tomorrow. Many of the crew members had worked tours before, big ones, successful ones, but the Eras Tour was different, not just in scale, but in intensity. Fans traveled across states, across countries just to attend. Entire cities shifted their schedules around the shows. Hotels sold out, flights filled, economies surged. Every night felt like a global event, and every night the crew carried the weight of making sure nothing went wrong. Taylor Swift knew this. She had seen it for years. From her earliest tours, Taylor had developed a reputation for noticing the people around her. The ones not standing in the spotlight, the ones quietly holding everything together. She learned names, she remembered faces, she asked questions, but the Eras Tour pushed everything to a new extreme, and with it came a realization. This tour wasn't just breaking records, it was breaking people. Behind the scenes, there were moments no one filmed. Crew members sleeping on cases between shifts, drivers pulling overnight routes to meet impossible timelines, technicians fixing issues minutes before showtime. They did it because that's what the job demanded, and because, like Taylor herself, they believed in what they were building. As the tour progressed, something unusual began happening. Rumors started circulating quietly among crew members. Not headlines, not press releases, whispers that Taylor had been watching closely, that she had been asking questions about pay structures, that she wanted to know how bonuses worked. At first, no one took it seriously. Artists thank their crews all the time. They give speeches, they post photos. But this felt different, because Taylor Swift wasn't just saying thank you. She was planning something. The moment came quietly. No cameras, no press, just a gathering of people who thought they were being called together for a routine announcement. Some assumed it was about scheduling, some thought it was about logistics. No one expected what came next. Taylor stood in front of them, not as a global icon, not as a billionaire performer, but as someone who had spent her life on tour, who understood what it meant to rely on a team. She spoke about the scale of what they had accomplished, about the impossible timelines, the physical toll, the sacrifices, and then she told them the number, $197 million in bonuses, given directly to the people who made the Eras Tour possible. Truck drivers alone received bonuses reported to be around $100,000 each. Others received life-changing sums, enough to pay off homes, erase debt, secure futures. There was no dramatic buildup, just disbelief, and then emotion. People cried, not polite tears, not camera-ready emotion, but the kind that comes from shock, from realizing that years of unseen work had been noticed in a way that almost never happens in this industry. Some crew members hugged each other, some sat down, some couldn't speak. For many, this wasn't just a bonus, it was validation. In the touring world, crews are often treated as replaceable. The work is demanding, the hours are long, and the recognition is minimal. Artists get applause, crews get paychecks, and usually nothing more. What Taylor Swift did shattered that expectation, not because she could afford it, but because she chose to do it. News of the bonuses didn't stay quiet for long. Once word got out, the reaction was immediate. Industry veterans called it unprecedented. Economists analyzed the impact. Fans were stunned. One headline said the bonuses alone were more than the total gross of many entire tours. Another pointed out that Taylor's decision would ripple through the live music industry for years, because once someone proves it's possible, the standard changes. But to understand why this moment resonated so deeply, you have to look beyond the numbers. This wasn't just generosity, it was a statement. About leadership, about responsibility, about who really makes success possible. For Taylor Swift, the Eras Tour was the culmination of everything she had built. But she knew it wasn't built alone. And in an industry obsessed with spotlight and ego, she chose to shine it somewhere else. This moment would become one of the defining stories of the Eras Tour. Not because of charts, not because of records, but because of what it revealed about power and how it can be used. And this was only the beginning, because as the tour continued and as the full impact of those bonuses became clear, something else started to happen. The crew didn't just feel appreciated, they felt loyal. And that loyalty would shape the rest of the tour in ways few people ever saw. No one walked out of that room the same way they walked in. For some of the crew, the number itself hadn't even registered yet. $197 million didn't sound real. It felt abstract, like a headline meant for someone else's life. It wasn't until individual amounts were explained, until people started quietly doing the math in their heads, that reality began to settle in. This wasn't a symbolic gesture. This wasn't a token thank you. This was life-altering. Truck drivers, some of whom had spent decades on the road, sleeping in cabs and living between cities, were suddenly being handed bonuses that rivaled the price of a house. Crew members who had spent years worrying about medical bills, student loans, or retirement found themselves staring at a future that looked completely different from the one they had imagined just hours earlier. And the shock wasn't just financial, it was emotional. Because in an industry where people are often told they're lucky just to have a job, someone has finally said, "You matter." Word spread fast, not through press releases or social media posts, but through phone calls, texts, quiet conversations in loading docks and catering tents, crew members calling their partners, their parents, their kids. Some didn't even know how to explain it. "I don't think you understand," one driver reportedly told his wife. "She gave us a lot, like a lot." Others broke down before they could finish the sentence. For many, this wasn't just about money. It was about being seen after years of being invisible. To understand why this hit so hard, you have to understand the touring world. Live tours run on endurance, on people who say yes when they're exhausted, on crews who move entire cities overnight and make it look effortless. These are people who miss birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, people who live out of suitcases and sleep whenever they can. They don't expect applause, they expect to be replaced. That's the unspoken rule. So when Taylor Swift broke that rule, it sent a shockwave far beyond the Eras Tour. Taylor had always been known for her attention to detail. Fans noticed it in her songwriting, her Easter eggs, her carefully constructed performances. But behind the scenes, that same attention was focused on people. She noticed who showed up early, who stayed late, who quietly fixed problems without being asked. Crew members have since said she learned names, asked how families were doing, remembered conversations from months earlier. It wasn't performative, it was consistent. And consistency is what builds trust. As the Eras Tour continued, something subtle but powerful changed. The crew didn't just work hard, they worked with pride, not because they were afraid of failure, but because they felt ownership. This wasn't just Taylor Swift's tour anymore, it was their tour too. That shift showed up in ways audiences never saw. Extra care in setups, faster problem solving, a level of teamwork that turned a massive operation into something almost fluid. People weren't just clocking in, they were invested. Industry insiders began paying attention. Tour managers, production companies, and other artists started asking questions. Not publicly, but privately. How did she structure it? Who approved it? What precedent did this set? Because once one of the biggest artists in the world shows what's possible, everyone else has to decide where they stand. You can't unsee it. Some executives were quick to point out that Taylor Swift's success made this possible, that not every tour could afford bonuses of this scale. But others countered with a harder truth. It wasn't about matching the number. It was about matching the intent, about recognizing that without crews, there is no show, no spectacle, no record-breaking tour. And suddenly, conversations that had never happened before were happening. For fans, the story added another layer to Taylor Swift's public image. She was already known as a songwriter, a performer, a cultural force. Now she was being talked about as a leader. Not the kind who stands at the top and takes credit, but the kind who redistributes power. That distinction mattered, because power in the music industry is rarely shared. As clips and reports began circulating online, fans reacted the way fans do, with emotion. Some said it made them proud to support her. Some said it changed how they viewed the entire tour. Others admitted it made them emotional in a way they didn't expect. It wasn't a marketing campaign, it was a values statement. And people felt it. But behind the viral headlines and social media praise, the real impact was quieter. Crew members went home differently. Some paid off debt they'd carried for years. Some put money toward their children's futures. Some finally felt secure enough to breathe. And perhaps most importantly, many said they felt respected for the first time in their careers. Not thanked, respected. Taylor Swift never made a spectacle of the bonuses. There was no dramatic video, no staged announcement for fans, no monetized moment. She let the story travel on its own, because it wasn't about applause, it was about alignment. As the tour moved forward, city by city, show by show, the Eras Tour became more than a concert series. It became a case study in leadership, in gratitude, in what happens when someone at the top decides to lift everyone else with them. And the ripple effects didn't stop there. As other tours launched and other artists prepared for the road, expectations had shifted, quietly, permanently. Crew members began asking new questions. Production teams reconsidered old assumptions. And the industry slowly began to change its language. Not overnight, but noticeably. What Taylor Swift did with the Eras Tour bonuses wasn't just generous, it was disruptive. It challenged the idea that success belongs only to the person on stage. It reminded people that behind every moment of spectacle is a network of human effort, and that effort deserves more than silence. And as the tour rolled on, breaking record after record, one thing became increasingly clear. The Eras Tour wasn't just the most successful tour of all time, it was one of the most human. As the Eras Tour moved from city to city, the impact of what Taylor Swift had done didn't fade. It deepened. Crew members didn't just talk about the bonuses once and move on. They carried the moment with them. In quiet conversations during load-ins, in late-night meals after teardown, in messages sent home from hotel rooms that all started to blur together. For many of them, the tour no longer felt like a temporary grind. It felt like something they were proud to belong to. That sense of pride changed the atmosphere behind the scenes. People showed up earlier, stayed later, helped without being asked, not because they feared consequences, but because they felt connected to the outcome. The success of the show no longer felt distant or abstract. It felt personal, and that kind of shift is rare in an industry built on burnout. Taylor Swift understood something that few global stars ever fully grasp. A tour is not a solo achievement. No matter how iconic the performer, no matter how loud the crowd, no matter how powerful the brand, nothing happens without the people in the shadows doing their jobs perfectly every single night. She had lived that truth since she was a teenager, playing small venues, watching crews pack up gear while fans went home. She remembered who locked the doors, who drove the vans, who stayed behind when the lights went out. The Eras Tour was the biggest stage of her career, but it was built on the same foundation she had always relied on: people. As word of the bonuses spread beyond the tour, something unexpected happened. The story escaped the music world. Business leaders began referencing it in talks about leadership. Economists pointed to it as an example of wealth redistribution within private enterprise. Labor advocates used it as proof that massive success didn't have to come at the expense of workers. This wasn't just a pop culture moment anymore. It was a cultural one. For years, Taylor Swift had been analyzed through every possible lens. Her songwriting dissected, her relationships speculated about, her business decisions scrutinized. But this moment shifted the conversation. People weren't asking what she was selling. They were asking what she believed, and the answer felt clear. Inside the touring industry, the ripple effects continued quietly. Crew members on other tours began comparing notes, asking questions, reevaluating what they accepted as normal. Production companies started having conversations they'd avoided for years about pay structures, about bonuses, about how long-term loyalty was built. Not every artist could match Taylor Swift's numbers, but many could match her mindset. And once that mindset enters an industry, it doesn't leave easily. For Taylor, there was no victory lap. She didn't frame herself as a hero. She didn't demand recognition. She went back on stage night after night, city after city, performing for fans who screamed every lyric, unaware that behind the scenes, something just as powerful was unfolding. The Eras Tour continued to break records. Highest grossing tour in history, sold out stadiums across continents, an economic force that cities prepared for months in advance. But when people who worked the tour looked back on it years from now, they won't start with the numbers. They'll start with how it felt, to be valued, to be respected, to be remembered. There's a moment near the end of the show when the lights dim and the crowd roars one last time. When the music fades and the stage clears, fans leave with memories. The crew stays. They pack up the dream, fold it away, load it into trucks. And on this tour, they did it knowing that the person at the center of the spectacle saw them, not as replaceable parts, but as partners. That's why some of them cried. Not because of the money alone, but because for once, success felt shared. In a world that often celebrates the individual and forgets the collective, the Eras Tour told a different story. That greatness is built together. That gratitude can be tangible. That leadership isn't just about rising, it's about lifting. Taylor Swift didn't just redefine what a tour could earn. She redefined what it could give back, and long after the final encore fades, that may be the most enduring legacy of the Eras Tour. By the time the Eras Tour began winding down in certain cities, something rare had happened. The story of the tour was no longer just about Taylor Swift. It was about people. Not the fans in the stands, not the critics writing reviews, but the individuals who arrived before sunrise and left long after midnight. The ones who lifted, drove, fixed, adjusted, and rebuilt the show again and again until it felt effortless. For many of them, the Eras Tour became a dividing line in their lives. There was before this tour and after it. Before, success in touring meant survival. After, it meant possibility. Some crew members later said the bonus allowed them to do things they never thought they could. Pay off long-standing debt, help aging parents, put down payments on homes, start savings accounts they'd never been able to maintain. But what stayed with them wasn't the number in their bank accounts. It was the feeling of being acknowledged not as labor, but as human beings whose work had meaning. That kind of recognition doesn't fade when the money is spent. It changes how people see themselves. Taylor Swift never framed the bonuses as charity, and that distinction mattered. This wasn't generosity from above, it was participation. She understood that the Eras Tour wasn't hers alone. It belonged to everyone who carried it across continents and time zones, everyone who made sure the lights came on and the sound was perfect, everyone who solved problems no one ever noticed because the solution worked. By sharing the success, she redefined ownership. In interviews months later, when asked about the Eras Tour, Taylor often spoke about gratitude, about how impossible it would have been to do any of it alone, about the people who stayed with her for years, sometimes decades, moving from tour to tour. She didn't romanticize the work, she respected it. And respect, when it's genuine, has weight. The music industry didn't transform overnight. It never does, but something shifted. Quietly, behind closed doors, conversations changed tone. Contracts were revisited. Bonus structures were discussed. Crew members felt empowered to ask questions they'd never asked before. Not because they expected $197 million, but because they now knew appreciation at scale was possible. And once something becomes possible, it becomes hard to justify ignoring it. For fans, the story added depth to the spectacle they loved. The Eras Tour was already emotional, a journey through years of music tied to memories, heartbreaks, and growth. Knowing what happened behind the scenes didn't diminish that magic, it strengthened it. It reminded people that the joy they felt in the stands was supported by hundreds of unseen lives working in sync. As the final shows approached in certain legs of the tour, emotions ran high. Crew members hugged longer, moments lingered, goodbyes felt heavier. They weren't just closing a chapter of work, they were closing a chapter of trust. When the last notes echoed through the stadiums and the final crowds drifted away, the stage didn't disappear. It was dismantled piece by piece, carefully, methodically, just like it had been built. And in that dismantling, there was pride. Because this time, the people doing the work knew something most crews never do. They mattered. Years from now, the Eras Tour will still be discussed. Its numbers will be cited. Its records will be referenced. Its cultural impact will be analyzed. But for the people who lived inside it, the legacy will be simpler. They will remember a moment when success didn't flow in one direction, when recognition didn't stop at the spotlight, when someone at the very top looked back and said, "We did this together." That is why some of them cried. Not because they were overwhelmed, but because they were seen. In an industry built on applause for the few and exhaustion for the many, the Eras Tour offered a different ending. One where success was shared, where gratitude was tangible, where leadership looked like responsibility, not distance. Taylor Swift didn't just make history with the Eras Tour. She changed the emotional math of success. And long after the lights go out, that may be the part people remember most.